Hey cinephiles. During the month of October, I embarked upon 31 days of horror, wherein I watched and reviewed a horror film every single day. I uploaded these as YouTube shorts, which you can find a playlist for in the description. However, I wanted to make a complete compilation of my horror movie marathon, and so I am making this video featuring all 31 bite-sized reviews. I've added a countdown, some spooky transitions between each review, and have restored all footage to its original aspect ratio. But that's not all. Stick around to the end where I will name the best and worst of what I watched in a number of categories, and not just the overall films, but the best villain, best kill, and best performance. Without further ado, I am pleased to present my 31 Days of Horror 2022 edition. I kicked off my 31 Days of Horror with 2020's The Empty Man, the feature-length directorial debut of David Pryor, an adaptation of Cullen Bunn's graphic novel of the same name.
On the first night, you hear him. And on the second night, you see him.
And on the third night?
Well, on the third night, he finds you.
The film boasts an incredibly atmospheric prologue reminiscent of one of my favorite modern horror films, The Descent, before shifting gears to become a cryptic detective story in the vein of early Nolan or Fincher. The film's probably overlong at 2 hours and 17 minutes, meandering in the latter half, but it's branded with indelible images and a compelling mythos that have given the film a deserved cult following. I give The Empty Man 4 empty bottles out of 5.
The empty man, the empty man, the empty man, the empty man.
Continuing with 2022's Oma, the feature-length directorial debut of Iris K. Shim. What if you took Minari, but instead of a sweet and funny grandma, she was a malevolent force that possesses the mom? That's my elevator to the gallows pitch for Oma, which is sadly nowhere near as scary or entertaining as that sounds. Sandra Oh stars as a single mother living off the grid and raising her sheltered teenage daughter while being haunted by the memory of her own recently deceased mother. On paper, I'm in favor of dipping American immigrant tales into the horror genre, but this one needed several more drafts. As game as Sandra Oh and Fievel Stewart are, their dialogue is painfully wooden, resulting in scenes that are melodramatic at best and unintentionally funny at worst.
Is this what you want? A final resting place?
Thankfully, this is mercifully short at 83 minutes. I give Oma 1.5 light bulbs out of 5. Continuing with 1975's The Amusement Park, directed by George A. Romero. Back in 1973, the granddaddy of zombie cinema was hired by the Lutheran Service Society of Western Pennsylvania to make an educational film about elder abuse, and boy did he ever. This once-thought-lost film plays like a Twilight Zone-esque nightmare as an elderly man, played by Lincoln Mazzell, wanders from one inhospitable park attraction to the next. He's just one in a slow-marching parade of senior citizens hoodwinked into a purgatory of endless ageism inevitably felled by the American healthcare system. The film does feel a little too aimless at times and left me wanting when it came to the creative potential of the rides and sideshows. However, considering the film's limited budget, it still proves to be profoundly effective. I give The Amusement Park 3.5 carousel horses out of 5. Continuing with 2022's Smile, directed by Parker Finn. Alright, full transparency here. After seeing the trailer for Smile what feels like dozens of times, this movie looked to be scraping the bottom of the genre's barrel, and I thought it was going to suck. Well, I'll be the first to admit that the joke is on me, because this movie rocks hard. Sosie Bacon shines as a level-headed psychiatrist who, after witnessing a traumatic experience with a patient, begins seeing an evil entity in the form of smiling people. Undoubtedly inspired by other transmissible curse movies like The Ring and It Follows, Smile stands with the best of them by skillfully setting up one memorable sequence after another based on its deceptively simple premise. This investigative psychological horror film has the brains and the guts that so few studio scare fares do anymore. I give Smile 4 creepy smiley faces out of 5. Continuing with Glorious, the 2022 film directed by Rebecca McKendry. In the aftermath of a bad breakup, Wes finds himself locked in a rest stop bathroom, having a conversation with the mysterious figure in the adjacent stall through a glory hole. I give Glorious points for its sheer originality, though I found the implementation of its bottle concept to be fairly forced. What's more, it's clumsily dropped onto a grating protagonist we're not given any reason to care about. The entity in the next stall over is voiced by one of the best in the biz, J.K. Simmons.
The universe has a favor to ask.
But even his dulcet baritone pipes can't fix the bowels of this phantasmagoric backfire. I give Glorious 2 turds out of 5. Continuing with Yokai Monsters 100 Monsters, the 1968 film directed by Kimiyoshi Yasuda. The first film in the Yokai Monsters trilogy stages a conventional class struggle in feudal Japan between poor villagers on the brink of being displaced by a rich landowner. This sets the stage for a ceremony of yokai tales. What could have been an awesome horror anthology is more of a straightforward revenge plot. Nonetheless, it finds occasion to masquerade as a terrific tokusatsu or practical effects film. It's not quite 100 monsters, more like 30, but what we witness is tantalizing. I give 100 Monsters 3.5 yokai out of 5. Continuing with Yokai Monsters Spook Warfare, aka The Great Yokai War, the 1968 Japanese fantasy horror film directed by Yoshiyuki Kuroda. It's fitting that the second film in the Yokai Monsters trilogy is indeed its centerpiece, bringing the yokai themselves into the front line as endearing, chatty characters who scheme together to take down an awakened demon from ancient Babylonia. It's an amusing escapade of samurai body snatching and haunting before a climactic showdown of kaiju proportions. I give Yokai Monsters Spook Warfare 4 yokai out of 5. Continuing with Yokai Monsters Along with Ghosts, the 1969 Japanese fantasy horror film directed by Kimiyoshi Yasuda and Yoshiyuki Kuroda. The final film in the Yokai Monsters trilogy sees the two directors of the previous films teaming up for the series' most peculiar outing, as the yokai are relegated to the background as a lone swordsman protects a young girl from a crime boss in hopes to find her long-lost father. While the forest spirits have a crucial if minimal part to play, I don't mind the departure, as this proved to be a rousing tale of vengeance and redemption that predates and foretells the masterful Lone Wolf and Cub franchise. I give Yokai Monsters Along with Ghosts 4 yokai out of 5. Continuing with Werewolf by Night, the 2022 television special directed by Michael Giacchino. Following the death of Ulysses Bloodstone, 5 monster hunters are gathered to his manor to participate in a competitive hunt to determine the next of succession. This is both a delicious throwback to Universal classic monster films, whilst serving contemporary appetites. In the increasingly convoluted and mixed bag that is Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Werewolf by Night is not only the breeziest outing by default, but quite possibly the best. It marks an auspicious start to their special presentations, a tantalizing peek at its hopefully more mature future, and an eye-catching directorial debut from composer turned director Michael Giacchino. Of course, his original score also bites hard. I give Werewolf by Night 4 full moons out of 5. Continuing with Deadstream, the 2022 film directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winter. Disgraced internet personality Sean Ruddy attempts to redeem himself and win back his followers by live streaming a night alone in a haunted house in this found footage horror comedy. As a longtime fan and critic of found footage films, this was a riotous romp that also managed to address many of my nitpicks with the subgenre. Characters making dumb decisions, the abundance and overuse of cameras, the inclusion of music, all of these tropes and more are cleverly explained and utilized. I've never seen a found footage protagonist like Sean before, played here by writer-director Joseph Winter, who walks a fine line between irritating and entertaining as a character we can root for and against along this incredibly inventive and demented ride. I give Deadstream 4 GoPros out of 5. Continuing with Lux Eterna, the 2022 film directed by Gaspar Noé. Photosensitive viewers beware. Part video essay, part experimental art film, this deviation sees French actresses Beatrice Dalle and Charlotte Gainsbourg playing versions of themselves on the set of a troubled production about burning witches at the stake. The backstage bickering and split-screen flickering stir a wicked brew somewhere between Birdman and Phantom of the Paradise before culminating with a strobe display of Dino-Senshi Porygon proportions. While Noé's films tend to fester in the brain long after you've seen them, I suspect this one will be a fleeting but nonetheless fascinating footnote in his overall filmography. I give Lux Eterna 3 crosses out of 5. Continuing with VHS 94, the 2021 film directed by Jennifer Reeder, Chloe Okuno, Simon Barrett, Timo Tejanto, and Ryan Prowse. From a rat man dwelling in the storm drain to a white supremacist terrorist group that gets their hands on a vampire, the fourth installment in the VHS found footage horror anthology series is one of the more inventive and reliable entries, save for the tiresome framing device, which is as trifling a sit-through as it has ever been. The four main segments do their part to fill up the gasp, laugh, and ultra-violence coffers we come panhandling for with each installment. The standout here is the subject from VHS alum Timo Tejanto, who previously co-directed the best segment in the entire franchise, Safe Haven from VHS 2. This time he's constructed a slow-burn mad scientist cyborg body horror splatterfest that feels like it should spawn an entire franchise of its own. I give VHS 94 3.5 VHS tapes out of 5. Hail Ratma. Continuing with Barbarian, the 2022 film directed by Zach Kreger. A woman staying at an Airbnb discovers that the house she has rented is not what it seems. That's all you should know about the plot going into Barbarian, a film best seen knowing as little as possible. I also don't recommend watching this one alone, not because it's overly scary or disturbing, but because experiencing this film with others and seeing their reactions is a trick and a treat. Barbarian is a genuinely unsettling, surprising, and ultimately surprisingly funny horror film. It pulls off something I particularly revere in the genre, unfolding a tale that I initially have no idea where it's going. While I took issue with where it ultimately went and how it went there, this will remain one of the landmark horror films of the year. I give Barbarian 3.5 doors out of 5.
This is perfectly natural.
Continuing with Salome, the 2022 film directed by Jean-Luc Herbelot. A trio of mercenaries extract a Mexican drug lord from Guinea-Bissau during the 2003 coup d'etat, taking refuge in a village along the Salome River in Senegal. What starts as a wickedly stylish crime thriller with 3 compelling anti-heroes in the cockpit morphs into a muddled supernatural horror action film. While I was far more interested in the movie it started as than the movie it became, I've never seen anything quite like Salome before, and that's certainly worth something. I give Salome 3 gold bars out of 5. Continuing with Terrifier, the 2018 film directed by Damien Leone. On Halloween night, a young woman finds herself as the obsession of a serial killer known as Art the Clown. In spite of the overused trope that is the killer clown, star David Howard Horton makes it seem wholly original with a pantomime performance that recalls the silent film era for an instantly iconic character that is somehow simultaneously silly and sadistic. The second star of the film is the makeup and special effects, spearheaded by writer-director Damien Leone himself. The centerpiece Death, you'll know when you see it, is a jaw-droppingly sick and twisted feat of old-school movie magic. If you can get past its simplistic setup and the cheesy performances that put it into motion, you are in for a glorious and goriest resurrection of the splatter film. It's easy to see why Terrifier garnered a cult following, and hard to see why I hadn't joined until now. I give Terrifier 3.5 creepy clowns out of 5. Continuing with Terrifier II, the 2022 film directed by Damien Leone. A year after the Miles County Massacre, Art the Clown returns to terrorize a family on Halloween night. Terrifier 2 is what you hope for in a horror sequel, keeping everything praiseworthy about the first film while raising the blood-soaked bar. David Howard Thornton reprises his lead role as Art the Clown, more entertaining and menacing than ever, and this time with a creepy sidekick known as the Little Pale Girl, played by Amelie McLean. Lauren Lavera makes for a kick-ass protagonist, while the franchise takes a right on Elm Street, leaning into the supernatural and carving out even more gore. As with Barbarian, I recommend seeing this one in theaters while you still can, as it makes for a great audience experience, including watching sensitive viewers get up and leave during any number of extreme scenes. I give Terrifier 2 4 creepy clowns out of 5. Continuing with Morbus, the 2022 film directed by Daniel Espinosa. After failing to cure his rare blood disease in the lab, Dr. Michael Morbius turns to more controversial methods, splicing his genes with vampire bats and creating a monster in the process. Following the flood of memes when Morbius bombed both commercially and critically, I had hopes this might make for an entry in the so bad it's good canon, or a fascinating failure in the very least. Unfortunately, Morbius is a mostly fangless, bloodless, and humorless affair. While Jared Leto's vacuous presence is offset by Matt Smith's gamesmanship, it ultimately amounts to a CGI-infested gnashing of teeth. I give Morbius
Moment of truth.
1.5 bats out of 5. Continuing with Dark Glasses, the 2022 film directed by Dario Argento. The Italian master of horror returns with his first film in a decade. Ilenia Pastorelli stars as an Italian escort who is blinded in an attack by a serial killer and teams up with a Chinese boy to track him down. While Argento can still orchestrate a stylish sequence pumped up by an electronic score by Armand Rebottini, this is an ultimately shallow giallo that neither titillates or thrills. In any case, it's certainly a step up from 2012's frightfully bad Dracula 3D. I give Dark Glasses 2 sunglasses out of 5. Continuing with Revealer, the 2022 film directed by Luc Boyce. Tensions rise when a stripper and a religious protester get trapped together in a peep show parlor during the apocalypse. It's This Is the End meets The Deuce, a novel idea with some notable visuals set to a groovy soundtrack that is almost entirely undone by its grating and heavy-handed screenplay.
What other crazy, messed up shit do I have to deal with in a single day?
I commend the 2 leading ladies for their efforts, if only they had better lines to deliver. Awesome closing credits though. I give Revealer 2 strippers out of 5. Continuing with The House, the 2022 film directed by Emma DeSoif, Mark James Rolls, Nikki Lindroth Von Bar, and Paloma Beza. Across different eras, a poor family, an anxious developer, and a fed-up landlady become tied to the same mysterious house in this animated dark anthology. While the first story is probably the only one that is strictly horror, each of the 3 offers something sinister, strange, and stirring. Of course, it helps that the voice performances are pitch perfect and the stop-motion animation is simply superb. I give The House 4 houses out of 5. Continuing with Creep, the 2015 film directed by Patrick Bryce. A videographer responds to a mysterious Craigslist ad, which takes him out of town for the day to document the last messages of a dying man, and things get increasingly, well, creepy. The found footage subgenre is rife with innovators and imitators alike, but Creep stands alone at the top of a dark staircase as a deeply psychological, darkly comical, and downright unconventional specimen. It stress tests the personal boundaries of social norms, redefines the relationship between a cinematographer and their subject, hilariously exploits the jump scare while severing the fuse of slow burn horror. This wild out lo-fi experiment hinges entirely on Mark Duplass, who gives a calculated, ferocious, and ultimately mesmerizing performance that keeps you on edge and entertained right down to the shocking and provocative finale. I give Creep 4.5 wolves out of 5.
Stop it! Stop it!
Continuing with Creep 2, the 2017 film directed by Patrick Bryce. A struggling YouTuber, desperate for a compelling subject, responds to a suspicious ad seeking a videographer. If you've seen the first film, you think you'll know the drill, but all bets are off when our returning creep reveals that he's a serial killer from the start. What follows is a brazen interrogation of criminal minds, gender dynamics, and documentary ethics. Mark Duplass, who remains absolutely manic and magnetic in the titular role, meets his match in Desiree Akhavan, who similarly feels like she has nothing to lose but something to gain. Their relationship is dangerous, demented, and even seductive. This not only concocts an even more intoxicating viewing experience than the first film, but officially makes Creep one of the best found footage series around. Creep 3 cannot come soon enough. I give Creep 2 4.5 wolves out of 5.
Aaron, is that you?
Continuing with VHS 99, the 2022 film directed by Maggie Levin, Johannes Roberts, Flying Lotus, Tyler McIntyre, and Joseph and Vanessa Winters. From a punk rock band with an edgy idea for their next video, to a condemned children's game show with a phantasmic grand prize, to a group of teenage boys peeping on the MILF across the street, there's no shortage of compromised characters ready to be served some gnarly comeuppance. The most impressive entry has to be To Hell and Back, which sees 2 best friends hired by a coven of witches to document a ritual dragged to the underworld. In all, there's not a bad segment in the batch this time around, and we're mercifully spared a drawn-out framing device as seen in previous entries. Instead, this is presented as a single VHS that has been taped over repeatedly, with one video nasty after another, a final vestige of analog mondo horror before shocking content found its way online. I give VHS 99 3.5 VHS tapes out of 5. Continuing with Halloween Ends, the 2022 film directed by David Gordon Green. The saga of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode comes to a spine-chilling climax in the final installment of this trilogy. At least that's what the film's official synopsis purports to be, but Halloween Ends is actually something else entirely. It would seem David Gordon Green was determined to not be accused of going through the motions, and instead made a radical uprooting of the franchise on par with The Last Jedi and The Matrix Resurrections. A decision bound to alienate many fans while exciting others. The film explores some compelling concepts, namely how society can breed evil. However, there remain so many baffling narrative choices and character inconsistencies as to distract gleaning anything of substance. While Halloween Ends does deliver in certain respects with some memorable kills and finally giving us the face-off we signed up for, it all feels too little or too late to be a satisfying conclusion to this otherwise worthwhile reboot. I give Halloween Ends 2 Michael Myers masks out of 5.
It's crazy intense.
Continuing with The Babadook, the 2014 film directed by Jennifer Kent. A single mother and her child fall into a deep well of paranoia when an eerie children's book titled Mr. Babadook manifests in their home. What makes The Babadook one of the most revered horror films of the 21st century? Besides the iconic use of its title, book, and boogeyman, the film operates on multiple fronts: haunting, possession, psychosis, abuse, all while making for a visceral allegory of grief and trauma. It has more than a few shades of The Shining, and similarly boasts incredible parent-child performances from Essie Davis and Noah Wiseman. The Babadook remains a terrific directorial debut from Jennifer Kent, and deserves its status as a modern horror classic. I give The Babadook 4.5 Babadooks out of 5. Continuing with Antichrist, the 2009 film directed by Lars von Trier. A grieving couple retreat to their cabin in the woods, hoping to repair their broken hearts and troubled marriage. But nature takes its course, and things go from bad to worse. Immediately stunning and eventually shocking, Antichrist is cinema's greatest provocateur at his most provocative. Lars von Trier's tale of grief, pain, and despair is a metatextual dissection of spousal suffering in the wake of parental anguish. Ripe with symbolism and rife with sadism, its exploration of psychology and mental illness opens itself to misogynist and feminist readings alike. I don't know if 2 actors have ever been more committed to a project than Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe. Antichrist is a singular work of art and allegory that cinephiles will undoubtedly be arguing aloud and wrestling within until the 3 beggars arrive. I give Antichrist 5 foxes out of 5.
Chaos reigns.
Continuing with Hellbender, the 2022 film directed by Toby Poser and John and Zelda Adams. A mother-daughter metal band living in their isolated woodland home threatens to break up when the lonely teenage girl discovers her family's ties to witchcraft. This is an unholy, original coming-of-age story that feels like Leave No Trace stirred in a brew with Suspiria. Made by a couple and their 2 daughters, and fused with their musical album of the same name, this is one of the most wicked homegrown projects to emerge from the pandemic. While Toby Poser and Zelda Adams are simply enchanting in their lead roles, the supporting players leave something to be desired. The visual effects can be hit or miss, but the snare drums and the sinister drama hit home. I give Hellbender 3.5 pentagrams out of 5. Continuing with White Light, the 2007 film directed by Robbie Banfitch. A young woman experiences terrifying episodes of missing time in this sci-fi mystery based on the research of Bud Hopkins. What begins as an intriguing stretch of visual storytelling is whittled down by its cut-and-dry dialogue and melodramatic sensibilities. White Light is at its strongest when showcasing striking 16mm photography set to its ethereal soundtrack. Half the time, it feels little more than an art school thesis film, which is incidentally exactly what it is. In any case, it's an attractive calling card for both director Robbie Banfitch and cinematographer Robert Carnevale. I give White Light 3 UFOs out of 5. Continuing with Spring Break Zombie Massacre, the 2016 film directed by Robert Carnevale. On a mission to save Spring Break, 2 badass bionic bros must fight and, more importantly, party their way through the zombie apocalypse, and hopefully defeat Satan, who killed both of their moms. Now, that's a synopsis for the ages, and frankly, so is this film. The brainchild of screenwriters and stars Sam Suckman and Maddie Zufelt, 2 young men with Down syndrome who met at the Special Olympics and realized their dream of making a zombie movie. Funded through Kickstarter and shot on location in Providence, Rhode Island, the result is a chaotic but inspiring DIY horror flick. Unless lest you think this is some corny Disney Channel content, rest assured it's full of blood, guts, and inappropriate humor. If you're hoping to see Spring Break Zombie Massacre for yourself, which I highly recommend, it can be hard to track down. Fortunately, it's featured in its entirety within the appropriately titled documentary, Sam and Maddie Make a Zombie Movie. I give Spring Break Zombie Massacre 4 zombies out of 5.
Later, bitches!
Continuing with The Nightmare Before Christmas, directed by Henry Selick. This one requires no introduction. The Nightmare Before Christmas is the rare film that's perfect viewing during Halloween or Christmas time, and worthy of annual rotation on either occasion. Gorgeous, groundbreaking stop-motion animation, spirited, infectious musical numbers, and a morbid sense of humor that will tickle old and young viewers alike. I give The Nightmare Before Christmas 5 Jack Skellingtons out of 5.
And what did Santa bring you, honey?
Concluding with Tumbad, the 2018 film directed by Rahi Anil Barbie. As someone who has finally dove headfirst into Indian cinema this year, I was especially keen to check out one of their most acclaimed horror films in recent years, and Tumbad was far and away the one most recommended to me, and it's easy to see why. This decade-spanning folktale sees a man returning to a haunted chapter from his past in search of lost gold. Imagine Treasure of the Sierra Madre by way of The Descent. Tumbad has been rightfully compared to the films of Guillermo del Toro, as it showcases some terrifying humanoids lurking beneath a morally bankrupt world. This serves as both a tantalizing introduction to Indian horror and an auspicious debut from writer-director Rahi Anil Barbie. I give Tumbad 4 gold coins out of 5. And with that, I will now honor the best and the worst of my 31 Days of Horror, beginning with my top 5 first-time watches. Number 5, Deadstream. Number 4, Terrifier 2. Number 3, Tumbad. Number 2, Yokai Monsters Along with Ghosts. And number 1, Creep 2. I had already seen the first Creep, which is why that didn't make this top 5. And speaking of things I'd seen before, best rewatch, Antichrist. The Nightmare Before Christmas is my runner-up. Best villain? Come on, this has to go to Art the Clown from Terrifier and Terrifier 2, as played by David Howard Thornton. Best kill? This one has to be a tie, and it has to be between Terrifier and Terrifier 2. If you've seen these films, then you know. But it's the hacksaw from T1 and what I'm calling the bedroom slaughter in T2. Honestly, nothing else even comes close. Next up, best performance. As much as I'd like Terrifier to sweep these categories, and as much as I like DHT's turn as Art the Clown, this has to go to Charlotte Gainsbourg for Antichrist, with a nod to Willem Dafoe as her incredibly game scene partner. Special shout out to Mark Duplass in the Creep films though. And then, how about best performance in a bad movie? Well, this has Matt Smith's name all over it for Morbius. And finally, last and least, the worst movie I watched. Believe it or not, this one is not going to Morbius, it's going to Oma.
Is this what you want? A final resting place?
And that concludes this year's 31 Days of Horror. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Let me know what you thought of this video series or any of the films I covered. Also, this is essentially taking the place of an Everything I Watched in October video, so please let me know what you watched and what you thought, especially if you had your own horror movie marathon. Feel free to share your top 5 first-time watches, any other categories, or even a list of everything you watched. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you down there. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Cineflect for video essays, film lists, and more.
I got this!
And click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. For Cineflect, I'm JS Lewis. Until next time, watch something good.